And we have another person with such a great foresight with us here today, Professor Pradyumna Vyas, who foresaw the events of 2021 when he started working on the solar powered vaccine cooler 10 years ago, because design thinking gives you that foresight that these kind of events can happen, will happen, and we have to be ready. And we have people like Professor Pradyumna to thank for that we are ready to inoculate the entire global population next year. So without any further delay, I think Professor Vyas's insights are more important than mine. So I will be ceding the floor to him. Sir.
Pradyumna,
Sir, you are on mute.
Thank you, Deepak, for your kind words, Dr. Shahani. It's always pleasure to hear you and your passion for design and your passion for nurturing the young generation for taking it forward. And I think out of that passion, this Design for Better World theme symposium is coming. So thank you, and thank you for inviting me to speak on that. It's a very apt topic to discuss, especially in the space of education, because COVID-19 has caught us off guard completely. And we not realize that what are the consequences, how to deal with an education sector, even the jobs and other things have impacted so much that entire world's population was some kind of put in lockdown situation, and didn't realize that where we as the human beings having so much of confidence to control and conquer the world with understanding of technology, that we can do, means almost the human species was controlling each and everyone, all kinds of life, flora, fauna, and manipulating genetically, and all those things were happening. And finally, a microorganism which you can't see with your naked eye has put entire humanity inside the house. And I think it is not small. It was started in March, and we are still under the lockdown situation, and it may go up to February or March or so. But the fact of the matter is, the life has to go on. And the biggest part of design, I feel, is to give hope and see that what happens post-COVID, what is the better world post-COVID, what is the scenario. And it is true that it is not going to be the same what it was before March. The entire processes, systems are going to be modified for the business, for the dealing, for the communication, all those things. When we are entering into ambiguous future, and they always say that the design education is something which can deal with ambiguity. And that's why when Deepak and Anando were talking about that, the design thinking is really coming into picture where there are wicked problems like what we are in. We don't know where we are heading, but at least we can attempt. There is a process by which you can take it forward. And that's why I always feel that any kind of crisis give opportunity, and the opportunity for the designers, the future designers, I see immense. And I see that this the whole developmental processes which were happening before pandemic, there was a huge concentration of industrial growth in the urban India. And when this situation has come, the human tragedy was migration. And that migration pictures have shaken all of us. And I think that we need to find a solution that such kind of human tragedies don't happen in future. And I'm going to share a small presentation with you to talk about that. As I am talking about that, being in India, I feel for the creative people, it's almost kind of, it's lucky to be born in India, and especially the generation which is there studying. There is such a bright future, and there's a reason for that, because the time has come where the design leadership position, the design outsource position is there in our country. So why India, and why design, and why that kind of positivity which we are talking about? Because India is culturally very vibrant, geographically very diverse, economically layered, and strategically global. It's amazing diversity. If you go to Europe and you just in any country like Germany or so, talk to 25 people, you can tell what kind of food they are eating, what kind of climatic conditions are there, what kind of houses they need to design. But you go, somebody asks you, what is the climate in India? What will you tell? What kind of climate is there? Weather is there in India? You go up north, minus 40 degree, you go in south, plus 40 degrees. So this kind of variation which we are living, what kind of food you eat, you know that what kind of food we eat. So that kind of diversity is basically the spark for the creative people. And those are the triggerers which you bring it into the institutes like ISDI, and then you allow people to explore and experiment. A lot of future aspects come in terms of product, service, and systems. Next slide, please. As I mentioned earlier, one is a diverse country. Also, it is the civilization is, I have written 5,000, but it could be 7,000. You see that any written matter is not there, but yes, it's a very old civilization, and there's a lot of tacit knowledge exists in there. And 1.3 billion people out of, I would say, half of the population is young population. So that is a lot of energy which is there. I think India is the probably only country in the world where the Stone Age and Space Age still coexist today. What I'm trying to say here is that in Ahmedabad, you take the ISRO, where we are launching rockets onto the moon and Mars, and just go 200 kilometers away in a tribal district where people are still using bow and arrow. So within the 200 kilometers, the variation of 10,000 years, you can see that what practices were happening 10,000, that's happening now, and rockets are launched. I think where you will have such kind of vibrant variations of different timing. It's the same time, but different types of timing which exist, which again is for the design professionals, the great thing. Next, please. So I think post-COVID, before COVID, that whole industrial model, which was totally based on consumption. But when we look into our agrarian ethos, where the knowledge was there in traditional knowledge, a lot of people are now talking about that knowledge relevance. So if you talk about sustainable thinking, the products which have been created by the craftspeople, by the people of that time, are obviously utilitarian, but they will go generation after generation. That the purity in the form and purpose, I think, was very, very strong, which people are talking in Society 5.0. So the point here I'm trying to make here is build the future of the wisdom of the past. And there is so much of wisdom is there in your tradition and culture, which will really help you to deal with the crisis which we are going through in the future. Next, please. And then, as I said, that the industrial ethos and the agrarian ethos, which I talked, there is so much of there. Industrial ethos is based on the second industrial revolution, and where the mass consumption, which has created environmental crisis, major way, is order of the day that you use more and throw more and use more and throw more. There is no what you call pureness in a complete approach to the design, and which is shifting now. Next, please. So look at that second industrial revolution and the design which started in Bauhaus in 100 years, to be precise, 101 years, because 1919, the first school of design education started in Germany. And that was totally working on form follows function. And that time, that designer's name, Ettore Sossas, is a person, he got a lot of inspiration from India also, has worked on this Olivetti typewriter called Valentino. And this typewriter must be, I think, early 80s or late 70s, which was done. One of my favorite product. It's a beautiful design. It's a pride to possess. And I think that kind of design, classic design culture was there, that how you would like to have pride to possess. And that pride of possession was certainly a very good thing. And a lot of thinking was there in the user convenience and how you will use material and how you streamline. But that started diluting slowly. In fact, Ettore Sossas himself has broken the language and got into totally disruptive way of presenting. And the bookshelf which you see, which most of the ideas when he was visiting India, he got from the Sunday markets. The Sunday markets, how trunks and all were painted, those kind of color palettes he has taken and started creating. And I think that Memphis movement has got into any kind of meaning language in design which you want to use, non-conformist type of thing. And I think those were somewhere you are talking about the designer more than the function. Function became the secondary aspect, and the designer name came first aspect. And I think there is a shift which is happening because the egocentric aspect in the design, that you have the brand, you have the product with the designer's collection kind of thing, is having certain contradiction with the environment and the inclusivity. Next, please. By the way, other photograph is also Ettore Sossas. Thanks to Deepak, he has pulled it, those photographs for me. And then this contemporary scenario, which I have already mentioned, that there is a total cultural loss, there is imposed need, and this actually the economic model which one has, where you are trying to create the need as aspiring need, then every day you create a need, and the technology is an enabler. So you bring technology into the product and you create another one and you create another one. And that's why we end up buying mobile phone every 6 months, because the features are different, and old one which works, but we have to throw it. And that kind of imposed needs, which are again creating an issue to the environment. Next, please. And this control alter delete culture, which is very prominent, that there is a psychological obsolescence. Even if you have it serve the purpose, but it is old fashioned, then you have to chuck it. And again, that is an issue which one has to address in future. Next. So there you go from industry 2.0, where pride to possess product, industrial streamlining the design for consumption, design for comfort, all those aspects were there. The industry 4.0 has again become very disruptive. And it is the imagination is the technology can do anything: automation, autonomous, integration, big data, IoT, cloud computing, everything you see. And it has posed a tremendous challenge. Almost 80% of the jobs which are there, which are skill oriented, will go away. And now there, that again the designer's role become very important, that if you are getting into engineering or if you are getting into medicine, there is a possibility the radiologist's job will not be required in future, because machine computing will do and analyze the issues and then tell that what problem you have. So this is the scenario where industry 4.0 is happening, where entire thing is shifting on automation and internet of things. But industry 4.0 has also saved us in the COVID time, which is internet of things. Next, please. So all these things which I talked about, which has led to sustainable development goals. There are 17 goals. If you have to save the planet, then you have to really go into that. And here, when we are talking about the future of design or future of business and design for better world, these are the 17 goals which have been worked out. People talk about, people say that, oh, we have to take care of our planet. If we will not take care of planet, planet will get destroyed. Planet will not get destroyed. Planet was there earlier, planet will be there afterwards, but you will not be there. So I think it is not threat to the planet, it is threat to you. And I think you have to change the behavior. And again, design will come into picture to change the behavior, to see that you protect your existence rather than trying to protect the planet, because planet will survive. And this thinking, you have to take it forward. Next, please. So design as a toolkit for this WDO, World Design Organization, has identified that design opportunity has to look into sustainable cities and communities, good healthcare. So healthcare is going to be a big thing. Quality education, the clean energy. The energy is going to be a big area in future. Industry innovation, then responsible consumption. All those aspects are there, which are going to be future industry, future area of investigation. And as you say, that design thinking is going to make a greater impact on this. Next, please. So eventually, what was told that there is nothing in isolation, nothing is in compartment. People, planet, and profit we have to bring together, and this coexistence of people, planet, and there is no, the charity is not sustainable. So we should not always expect that we will do charity and do things. So we have to find out the models of design, and we have to see that we coexist with the planet, we make the profits, but it should be ethical, it should be more value centric, as Dr. Shahani mentioned. So there is to be major shift on value creation, and that value creation certainly is obviously the human centric aspect which is going to be there. So next, please. So I was just looking into, it is not that the vision was not there. Actually, we were discussing, Ritika, Deepak, and I was talking about, and I did mention about that when Bawas was set up, there were some 10 rules of good design were put up. Deterum, who did Brown product design, he also mentioned 10 rules which were overlapping. Innovation, useful, aesthetics, understandable, all these aspects, honest, long lasting, thoroughly detailed, eco-friendly. Now these we are talking about almost like when Bawas was set up, and this is almost 60, 70 years ago, and which we are focusing on people, focusing on environment, focusing on society, and design's main role was to connect. And thereafter, Industry 4.0, this Society 5.0, which again, Dr. Shahani has mentioned, that how we use technology for the benefit of people and community. Because technology is enabler, technology is moving very fast. So far, industry has taken advantage of technology because technology is provider, technology is enabler, and they have just come out continuously, product after product. If you don't need, just come out, because technology is making you come to take another product, you are taking it out. But Society 5.0 is talking about that, all right, technology comes second, it's enabler, but society comes first. And this entire better world which we are talking about in this conference is that how Society 5.0 focus on people, focus on quality of life, focus on inclusivity, focus on coexistence, co-creation, all those things, and use the technology. And as I am telling you that being in India, the opportunity which you have, that you find out Internet of Things, can you really provide healthcare services to the remotest part in Northeast? Can you really work into water transportation? So these are the industries which are going to come up. The energy industry is going to come up in a big way, non-conventional energy, mobility industry is going to come up. So they will require a new thinking. They will require a breakthrough innovation. And as I said, that the technology management, and it is time for design, where the people have to focus more on design thinking for the holistic development and take it to the next level. Next, please. So here that Deepak has pulled out some images for me to talk about that how this rural to urban, or we are talking about from chula to induction technology, where both of them are doing, which are still in practice. And the fact of the matter is the number of mobile phones which have been sold in the rural India are much more than what it has been sold in urban India. And that gives the tremendous opportunity for designers, that how are you going to create user experience, user interface, internet connected services, empowering people who have problem in mobility issues, from coming from hilly region to the marketplace. It has empowered or democratized the entire industry sector with the power of creativity and with the power of technology. And I think what Deepak was talking about, that around 13-14 years ago, I had designed a small 3-button mobile, keeping in mind that only you connect with the responsible way, children will connect with parents in school, and not to have a nuisance in the classes who are banning the mobile. but at least you are connected with near and dear one. And also I had got some grant from Department of Science and Technology, again, maybe I think 12, 13 years ago, about the vaccination program in rural India where the electricity is not there. Then how you will use the technology called Peltier chip and make it a cooling device present over there, so the immunization program can happen effectively in rural India. So I think somewhere this scenario creation post-COVID is very important, which tool designers have. And the industry, I would say, are looking into those kind of scenarios, that where industry is going to go. For parents, I would say that more than technology and management, design is going to fit in not only for the designing the products and fashions and all. Mind you, post-COVID, it is going to go into the governance, it is going to go into the security of the country, it is going to go into healthcare department, it will go into 250 sectors, with Professor Ranjan used to talk about earlier, that from agriculture to everywhere, people are going to appoint designers to give them a holistic picture about it. So that is the way I think this profession is going to move. And for better world, you cannot ignore design, because the aspect of design which I feel is basically dealing with human and environment. I think this humbleness and which cannot be provided by artificial intelligence, humility, this empathy with people, I think those are the areas are going to be more prominent in future. And as I said, artificial intelligence is going to crack lots of manufacturing processes. Machine learning is going to also take up generative processes, but it will not eliminate the art, the aesthetics, the emotions, if the society, social science and all, where design is going to play a major role. So for any industry who is looking into the future, I would say that it is important to look into design thinking, at least that gives a holistic way. And the parents who should encourage their children for design education and not look only for the grades and marks, which becomes a very thing that we are just chasing, but empower their children to think original, and dare to fail and experiment and do things which allows the design thing. And obviously students who feel that they can deal with ambiguity, they want to experiment, I think that's the way you can create the better future. Thank you very much. I think this is the last slide. Is there any other slides? Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. And Mr. Adam has posted a question, and we'll come back to it right after Geeta. Over to you, Ritika, please.
Thank you so much, sir, for all the questions you're posing to us. And for the audience, if you all have any of the questions, you all can post them into the chat, and we'll take them after we finish with Geeta's session. I'm sure we've all seen an overview of how the role of designers have changed over time, right? With the previous presentation. And our next panelist is a visionary who's taken a small team of 7 people and grown it into India's largest digital experience company. She's worked with banking, she's worked in fashion, she's worked in data management, you can name it, and she's worked in that sector, right? And all of this she has done with the belief that the future is not yet to come, but the future has already begun for us. So without any further delay, I would like to invite Geeta Sitar to share her vision with us.
Thank you, Ritika. And thank you, Professor Vyas, that actually whatever you said is a lot of food for thought. And we should definitely catch up later and discuss more. First of all, thank you, ISDE ISU, for having me here and giving me this platform to share some of my thoughts. What I want to share with you is the evolution of the business of design. So when Ritika introduced me, she mentioned that I I'm part of Fractalink, but I head business over there. I do have a design background, but the last 15 years has been dedicated to growing the company, understanding clients, understanding consumers, and fashioning Fractalink into a team that is future ready. And I want to cover some aspects of how the design of business has changed, how consumers have changed, and therefore how designers have to change. I'm going to share my screen now. I hope this is visible. Yeah, okay. So like I said earlier, I'm going to cover three big buckets of stakeholders, so to speak. One is the client, which enables us all to get our bread and butter and sometimes a little bit of caviar. Then there is the consumer, that is all important. That's who we design for, that's who we study constantly. Then there is technology, which is an enabler, which design now cannot really ignore. And then as a designer, I think we're all egotistical enough to put us in the center of these three buckets and say that we're the ones who connect these three stakeholders, these three buckets. And I want to spend a couple of minutes on how design was 20, 15 years ago, maybe even 10 years ago. It was very tactical. All of us designers, we've studied processes, we've studied how we should actually look at the consumer and break them down and all of that. But 10 years ago, I don't think our clients or the industry had gave us a luxury of time and money to actually indulge in that process. So we had to call upon a lot of intuition, a lot of previous experience, and design as you will. 15 years ago, I remember when there was a potential client who wanted to speak to us, we'd go over there, there'd be 2-3 people in the meeting who'd just talk about what their requirements were. A written brief was unheard of. And we'd go away and we would, intuitively break down the process. But finally, what we presented to the client was finished screens, designs, and there'd be 2 options or 3 options, and based on the client's individual preference, they'd give us comments and we'd iterate, and that was done, which is a far cry from how design actually happens today. And I will go into a little bit of detail on that. As somebody who leads a design business, one of the most common questions I'm asked, especially by skeptical clients, is what is the value that design brings to us? We go in with proposals which are fairly large, and we're asked, what is the value of design? And it's very, very difficult to actually put a value on design. It's inherent in the product, but there's no statistics, there's no real data until McKinsey actually spent some time tracking this. And a lot of you may have read the report, but I'll just give you a little bit of information on that. What McKinsey did was it tracked 300 very large companies listed on various stock exchanges and belonging to various industries over a period of 5 years. And they looked at 100 design actions that these 300 companies took in this time, and millions of financial data points. They spent time talking to the C-suite of these companies. They spent time talking to the designers that these companies actually engaged with. And finally, they came out with a report which divided these 300 companies into 4 quartiles. And the top quartile, they said, is the most mature business design-wise. And they have a design ideology and they follow that. And what was remarkable was that this top quartile actually outperformed their competitors, their peers, by at least 1:2. The shareholder value that they created, the returns that they were able to give to their shareholders was far more than, even quartile 2. Quartile 2, 3, and 4 was the difference was very, very marginal, but quartile 1 was big. And a lot of industry, a lot of businesses that we now come across, I think they're aspiring to belong to the first quartile. And there are four things which kind of sets them apart. A mature design business, it sets them apart. One is when you drive and measure design performance in the same way that you measure revenues and costs. I mean, revenues and costs are tracked by everybody, and that's been happening since since businesses started. But now businesses are starting to track design performance. And I'll give you an example from maybe 10 years ago, when still design was definitely not a mature business. But one of the life insurance companies of India asked us to design not just their website, but also their logged in section. So for that time, it was a huge engagement. And it was a very, it was a design engagement where the C-suite was involved. And we did spend a lot of time trying to actually fit in as much of the design thinking process as we could at that time. Before we redesigned these assets, their online sales was about 0.8% of their total revenue. And about a year after we finished this redesign, it was a little over 2%. Now it's marginal, it's not that great, but it was tracked. And I'm talking about 10 years ago. And yes, it did prove to us even 10 years ago that good design does make a difference in revenues. The second is believe and drive customer experience around an omni-channel ecosystem. Now, omni-channel ecosystems, I think, is a terminology that is much bandied about. Everybody talks about it. But again, what we are seeing is that businesses are thinking omni-channel. They are thinking in-store, they are thinking on web, they are thinking salespeople, they're thinking apps, and how all of these actually work together to create an ecosystem, because that is when a customer feels seen, when a customer feels as if this brand actually cares about me. Retail does it beautifully already. One of the biggest omnichannel experiences, the celebrated omnichannel experience, is Disneyland, where you have one bracelet which actually does everything for you in the park, in the hotels, and everything. And that, if you read a little bit about omnichannel ecosystems, you see that it really does give a lot of value to the customers. The third one is actually one of my favorites, which is make user-centric design and design thinking everyone's responsibility. And over here, when I say everyone's responsibility, I'm not talking about C-suite and middle management, but even lower down. And this is, I know it's difficult to do for large companies, but again, I have an example over here of a bank in India that actually did it. It's one of the larger banks, which is known for its digital savviness. And a few years ago, what it did was it ran this program where anybody from any department could actually every quarter suggest ways in which existing product could be enhanced, a new product could be made which engage the customer more, or tweak an existing product. It could be anything. And there was a committee which actually looked at all of these proposals, and every quarter picked 5 or 6 such proposals to go into prototype. And we'd work with them very closely to do a very rapid round of prototyping, which we'd then present to management, and the management would pick 1 or 2 of those to actually take to production. Now, what this actually did was, down the hierarchy of the bank, it made everybody own the design. They were vigilant about it, they were involved about it, they were invested in it. And that really does make a difference. And yes, in that bank, design still is important, and it's still considered as a leading light amongst Indian banks. And the last is willing to and eager to commit to continuous testing, listening, iterating, improving. This is the agile methodology of working. And if you do the first three, I think the fourth is something that comes naturally to an organization. They realize that even designers can't get it first time right. And this is actually to address that. In the old way of working, you would design an entire thing, you would develop the entire thing and have a big launch. And if the product failed, it was disaster. But now we take it in small bite-sized steps where you go with an MVP one, you release it, you see what your customers have to say, you tweak, you improvise. And this is the way you're pretty sure of where you're going throughout the journey. Let's talk a little bit about today's client. Once upon a time, like I said, it went by individual choices, and a client's digital products were a product of what their likes were. And sometimes when we wanted to be rude, it would be what their child liked, or whatever their spouse liked, or something like that. But today, we take a lot of design thinking workshops for industry. And it's almost, I think, mandatory for industry to hold these design thinking workshops. So our client today is more educated. The client is more eager to participate and co-create products. They actually take the time, they make the effort to be part of that entire process, so that so it's a true spirit of partnership. The client today understands that a design house is not working in isolation, cannot work in isolation. The third is they understand the importance of research and processes. 4 years ago, we started a research division at Fractal. And initially it was a hard sell, trying to tell our clients to, why don't we do a research exercise before we actually go into design? And they were like, we know our customers, we know our business. How is 1 hour of talking to our customers going to give you any insights? Because obviously it meant time and it meant money. But today we at least have a couple of research projects going on at any given time. Even if we say sometimes that, we don't think research is needed for this particular project, the customer says, nahi, kar lete hain. Let's just do it. Let's just be sure. So it's very, it makes you happy that the customer is becoming so evolved. And the last is the design has the ear and the time and the eyes of the top management. We have a seat at the table. Whenever we start a project, we spend a couple of weeks in discovery. And discovery means speaking to the C-suite, holding workshops, doing brainstorming sessions. And they turn up. They turn up for 4 hours at a time. Sometimes they turn up for a day at a time. They block their calendars. Sometimes we say, okay, let's just do it somewhere else. Not possible during COVID times, but we've actually hired conference rooms, and we've said, leave your phones outside and let's just concentrate on this for 4 hours, and they do it. And of course, the flip side is that the client is very educated. And that can pose a challenge sometimes, because knowledge has become very democratic and everybody has access to it. Given that they live, breathe their business, plus they have access to all of this knowledge and they're very interested and invested, sometimes it can pose a challenge, but those are the kind of challenges that I think designers thrive on. And the last I'd actually want to talk about is the kind of engagements we have today. Until maybe even 4 or 5 years ago, we do the standalone website, we do the standalone app, we do the standalone marketing campaign. But those are not really sustainable. If you want to make a big difference to the way you interact with your consumers, I think industry has realized that they need to have a roadmap. They need to kind of look at themselves. They need to see what kind of assets they have, what kind of infrastructure they have, what they need to actually add. And we help them to actually draw out this roadmap and say that, okay, these are the low-hanging fruit, let's just do this first. While we're doing that, why don't you actually collect this data or put this infrastructure together or hire these people? And that is the kind of large-scale transformations that business is going towards today. Where if it's a new fintech, it's a given, they have a roadmap. but we're talking about legacy companies which have a lot of digital products designed and developed over years of time, which have nothing to do with each other. They work in silos. It's a nightmare to maintain. And we're seeing that a lot of these companies are now saying, okay, let's do a full digital transformation. And which is why we're also seeing that, the big four, the consulting companies, they're leading design conversations. And unless design houses, go up the value chain and start providing consultancy services themselves. And again, it's impossible for us to actually today compete with the likes of the McKinseys and Bains and BCGs, because their mandate for consulting is much larger, and design is just a small part of it. But then they own those conversations, and they are the ones who are actually driving the initial research. So one of the things that we have to keep in mind is that we need to go up the value chain in order to stay relevant. Otherwise, we will become only implementers. I've already touched upon agile methodologies for working. Couple of other things that we've seen in how large companies actually drive these transformations is they set up design factories. I haven't come across a design factory in India so far, but all of our clients outside of India, they set up design factories. And by that, I mean, they actually hire or rent a separate space. They have different people working over there who are dedicated to the design factory. It's a space where product owners, designers, developers, scrum masters, agile coaches, all of them sit together and work together. They'll take up one journey. They'll follow the entire process from research to the journey mapping, to the UX, UI, development, testing, iterations, all of that. And one of our customers in Mauritius started with a 30 people design factory. I was just talking to them yesterday, and today there are 130 people. So that's the kind of scale of design engagements that they're looking at. In India, what we're seeing is center of excellences are being formed for design. Again, there's another rather large bank in India. And typically, until a couple of years ago, each product team would go out to different designers, different developers, get their apps, get their websites developed. And the brand team would kind of give a sign off on whether the brand guidelines were being followed. But the challenge over here was one product team did not know what another product team was doing. And again, it's happened to us where two different teams of the same bank have come to us for the same need. And we said, okay, guys, talk to each other and see what's happening. But, putting together a center of excellence would actually take away these kind of mishaps. They have a central design system. There are product owners who talk to each other, who see what data is being collected where, and how you can leverage that experience in order to kind of enhance the next. So this is where we're seeing design, client engagements, the way we work is going. And scale, I think, is the one biggest change that we can see, where a design team of 20-25 people once upon a time was considered very big. Now there are some projects, some transformations where the client needs a team of at least 50 or 60 designers to start the conversation. And that's the kind of scope of design that there is. Let's move on to consumers today. These are the scary ones, right? We've heard that they don't have attention, they have no loyalty, they don't like products, they want experiences, and they're becoming very ethical. All true, various degrees. So from all of that, I've culled a few which to me will make the most amount of difference in the way we design. The first one is radical personalization. And that we're seeing already in all of the apps that we're using, where the app seems to know you and anticipate your needs even before you know you have them, right? And that's very, very important to consumers. Experience more. They want to experience more. They're less product. They're less material driven, and they want to experience more. Whether it's a holiday, whether it's a shopping experience, whether it's a walk down the park. And this again opens up huge opportunities, I think, for us. There is quest for convenience. Now, who doesn't want things to be convenient? If a product is designed where convenience is not really kept in mind, it can be an experience from hell. A couple of years ago, I was trying to onboard myself onto a very large international bank. We were opening a corporate account over there. It was mandated, so we were opening one over there, and I was onboarding myself as somebody with the highest level of access. I got 3 emails from them, one with the username, one with one part of the password, one with the second part of the password. I appreciate that you're being, very conscientious about security. Then I was asked to log on to one portal. Then I was asked to download one app. Then I had to log on to the portal, do some transactions, which would give me a code, which I would put into the app. Then the app, I had to do a couple of things, which would then give me something, which I had to put back into the portal. I think I'm pretty digitally savvy, but I had to call my finance team. And my finance team had to have the relationship manager of the bank. And it took us a good 10-15 minutes to onboard me. What does that really tell me as a consumer? That I can't expect much from this bank. And actually, I've never logged in over there. That onboarding was just the first thing and the last thing that I did over there. I will never actually go to that interface and try and figure things out for myself. But on the other hand, there are some payment apps which do such a beautiful job of making things convenient, right? And payment apps is something that you use a couple of times a day, maybe. And there's one in particular, which I'm not going to name, but it spoils me for everything else. And so who says customer loyalty can't be bought? You make it convenient and we'll stay with you. Everyday wellness. This, I think, is a huge thing because of our lifestyles, of the kind of food that we eat. We're not healthy people at large anymore. And I think consumers are now realizing that, and they're going towards wanting to take care of themselves. So whether you're trying to sell a product, whether you're trying to sell food, whether you're trying to sell an app, as a designer, you have to keep that in mind. And the communication part of it, of how whatever it is that you're designing is going to help people, that you need to bring forth. Ethical living. Not so much the millennials, but the millennials too, but Gen Z, I think, is going to completely change the way we look at experiences from an ethical point of view. I mean, all of us are reading now that Facebook is getting into some, pretty hot water because of its practices. Maybe what we're going to see is that industry, they have legal teams, they have compliance teams. Maybe in the future, they should have a committee for ethics, which needs to sign off on anything and everything that is done. Maybe one thing that we could look at as a design business is to have a couple of ethics officers in-house to make sure that what we're doing in the future is ethical. And the last is search for authenticity. We all know WhatsApp University. We all know that the internet is full of information that you just cannot believe. So I would say there is a term called symmetry of information, where the consumer should have as much information about a business as the business has about us. And the businesses today have a lot of information about us, right? So we also, as consumers, should have as much information about the business, about where they source material from, what their practices are, who's working for them, and all of that. And going forward, this is another thing that I think design and designers will have a key role to play over here. Make sure that we drive businesses towards authenticity, towards good ethics. And so that's where consumers today. And technology. It surrounds us. There's so much happening on a day-to-day basis that they're flummoxed by it sometimes. Again, what I have done over here is I've listed a few technologies which I think will enable experiences in the future in a big way, which will have a big impact. They cover machine learning, artificial intelligence, IoT, predictive analytics, blockchain, AR, VR, and biotechnology. I'm not going to go into each one of these, but while I was reading up on something, I've come across a few experiences which have been enabled by technology, which really struck me. And I'm going to share a few of those with you. So this, in Wuhan, and obviously everybody in the world now knows Wuhan, 5G robots, 12 5G robots worked in a hospital in Wuhan with COVID-19 patients. What they did was check temperature from time to time. They did all of the sanitization. They served the patients food. They looked at some other vital signs, and they sent it all of this data back to some place where the doctors were actually monitoring this. Now, this is one piece of technology, but let's look at what are the opportunities for design that this one piece of technology has actually given us. Product designers will be needed to design the robot. System designers or service designers will be needed to design the entire service, from data collection over here to data being sent elsewhere, and then what do you do with that data? There'll be UI designers who will be needed to design the interfaces of whatever input device the robot has and where the data is being seen. Data visualizers will be needed to actually make sense of that data. Right. So there's one piece of technology, and there's a huge opportunities for so many kinds of design coming out of that one thing. This one is special because it's being driven by an Indian designer in Samsung, and Pranav Mistry, of course. And what it will give to us is, in the future, digital humans who have personalities, who have knowledge, who are always patient, who are always positive, and they have answers. They're programmed and they learn. Machine learning will keep them learning. So they will act as sales agents. They will act as other kinds of jobs that humans don't really want to take. But again, look at how many different kinds of opportunities it creates for designers over here. Professor Vyas touched upon Industry 4.0. So, an open IoT platform has been created for Industry 4.0. It's just one sentence, but the possibilities are so immense. It's an open platform, which means anybody can actually utilize the resources over here, create programs, create products, and put it back into the system, making it richer. And it'll burgeon, it'll grow so large that the number of designers who are needed to actually utilize this platform in an intelligent way to deliver solutions, it will be tremendous. Again, over here, it's, designers, the role of designers, according to me, is changing. They're no longer visual designers. They're no longer only UX designers, but these designers have to understand data, they have to understand systems, they have to understand businesses, they have to understand consumers. It's asking for a lot, but that's where we're going, because you have all of this infrastructure, but how to utilize it, leverage it, and make it consumable is up to us. Then there was a small town in Germany which created a digital twin. This was actually done because some repairs, some redevelopment had to happen in that town, and it looks like a pretty small town, but and they created it. Once it's done, of course, they're using it for the purpose that it was created, but it can be used for entertainment. It can be used for tourism. It can be used for so many different things. There's an asset. It's up to designers to and product engineers to figure out what to do with that technology, what to do with that asset. I loved this one because so far, AR, VR, mixed reality, the kind of applications that we have seen are slightly gimmicky. Yes, we've been able to do a couple of things which actually fit into the actual consumer journey and add value. But I mean, let's face it, mostly it is gimmicky. But they found these guys over here have found an application with a VR headset where there are a number of small airfields which have next to no traffic, maybe one flight a day, one flight in 2 days. And it's impossible, it's not really feasible to have somebody manning that airport, in the fancy ATS. So what they've done is a collective of these small airports, and there's one or two people who are manning and controlling it remotely with the help of VR headsets. Now that is really useful application for a technology. And I came across this bath mat which tracks weight and posture dependent on how you're standing and how the weight distribution is. Now, anybody who actually tracks their weight every day, I think they go a little cuckoo, because every 200, 300 grams here, there, and it sets off alarm bells. But instead, this bath mat will record it every day, send it to an app, won't freak you out every day, but you can figure out what kind of alerts you want, what kind of reports you want, what kind of analysis you want. And that, I think, is great application for IoT. And I'm coming to the close of what I actually wanted to cover, where we've looked at how businesses are changing, we've looked at how consumers are changing and how technology is changing. And of course, as designers, how do we need to change in order to be able to address all of this, right? What we think is needed is a T-shaped hybrid designer. Now, by the T shape, I mean, the vertical line is your design savviness, your knowledge of design processes, which has to be deep and it has to be good. But the horizontal line has to go across a lot of practices, a lot of functions, where you need to be empathetic, you need to have an analytical bent of mind, you need to be able to collaborate, and you have to have great communication skills. Unfortunately, it's not enough to be a great designer unless you can actually explain the process, explain the design, explain the benefits, the value of what it is that you are designing. You're not going to be successful. And you have to have the ability to learn, unlearn, and relearn. Why? I mean, I think it's evident because everything is changing so fast. Everything that you knew or you thought you knew has changed. So you need to be able to forget that, adapt, adopt new systems, and move forward in a ever wanting to learn more kind of way. And that's actually it. I'm actually done. Open to questions.
Thank you so much, Geeta. That was a great snippet of what happens on ground and what we should be aspiring towards. We now move on to the Q&A session, and we're gonna start with a question that was posted by Adam, who is our panelist in the evening again. The question is, how does Indian designers navigate the growing middle class aspirations that are driven by the global values and consumption with the needs of sustainable products and services for many social and economic layers in the Indian society?
Whom do you want to answer?
Pradyumna sir, you.
Okay, all right. Adam, I think we are connecting after 30 years. Am I correct? I think 30 years ago, Adam has visited NID, if I'm not wrong, and we interacted. So it's good to connect with him. You see, NID is a great example. The designers working for the middle income group, which is almost like 300 million people in this country. And the craft tradition, which is there in this country, I think the design fraternity from India has really worked with them to see that how we come out with contextual product on this traditional way, whether it is in handloom, whether it is in the wood carving to stone to wall. So the big segment of these products have been created by the designers. And the next session, I think that I'm fan of Sonam, the work which he is doing. So you are going to witness some of these work which Sonam has done and Neelam will be showing, where how designers are really working in a sustainable space where employment generation aspects are happening, regenerative materials, they are using natural fibers and other things, and also touching the global market, not only the middle class market, but also touching the global market. So I think the design model which has been adopted in India, the great number of people are documenting this linguistic crafts and building newer designs based on that. And Fab India is a big example to see that how that brand has been created, which is very value centric, inclusive, and working totally for the development of people who are working in that direction. The other side is very global, consumer centric, consumption centric, and you cannot avoid that because people are the design industry is growing in this country, and industry's requirement is also to make profit, so those aspects are also there. But nevertheless, the large number of designers are engaged in this social entrepreneurship, which you are going to hear in the next presentation, and a lot of things will get clear. So this is what from my side. Uh, thank you.
Geeta, we'd like to hear
Geeta,
your
your opinion.
side as well.
Oh, well, actually, I think Professor Vyas has covered this very amply, and he has a lot more insight into this. But sustainability is something that touches everybody, and more so in the world of physical products and craft, more than the digital world that we drive. So I think he's covered this really well.
All right. We move to our next question, which is what would be the three new attributes that the industry expects our new graduates to have in the coming world, in the post-COVID world? Geeta, can we start with you on this and then?
Okay. So the three main attributes, I've actually covered a couple of them when I was talking about the designers of tomorrow when I finished my presentation. But I'll reiterate a couple of things. One, I think, is collaboration, because the scale of the projects is such that you need collaboration. And also, I think remote working is here to stay, at least in a lot of the industry. We've seen that it's possible and it works well. So remote working is here to stay, and hence you need to be able to collaborate even more effectively in order to deliver what is expected of you. The second is the learn, unlearn, and relearn, because fresh graduates, people with a little bit of experience, we've all been taught a certain way to work, and we've experienced a certain way to work, but that is going to change. So if the tools that you use, just a small example, like a brainstorming session. We're used to conducting it in a physical space with post-it notes, with eye-to-eye contact, body language, playing a huge role. But that may not be possible. But there's Mural, which does a fantastic job for this right now. But you have to kind of school yourself into believing in the tool and to driving conversations through those tools. And the last thing that I would think is attitude. Attitude towards your own work, attitude towards your colleagues, attitude towards your organization, towards your clients. We've seen that COVID times has actually created stresses where, those kind of situations would never create stress earlier, but it does create it now. And the attitude with which you actually conduct yourself actually would make or break how you're perceived, how good you feel about yourself, and how effective you are.
Okay. Sir, your perspective on this?
Okay, all right. You see, I will have to put question in a different way. Industry is expecting that the person comes and make profit for the industry, So, as Dr. Shahani mentioned about value centric, I think somewhere the value comes in picture, and I always say that when I was in NID, I used to tell that I never mentioned that our graduates should be industry ready, because industry wants to do immediate target fulfill. Our graduates should be able to tell industry what is correct for them. I think that the value aspect comes in, that I'll do it, but I think in my view, for sustaining the long-term profits and other aspects, holistic thing, these are the right things for you to do. That kind of confidence, I would say, the student should have to go and tell industry. But nevertheless, multi-skilling is very important. You cannot really have one skill and go to the industry, because as Geeta mentioned, the scenario is continuously changing. Things are becoming redundant overnight. So you have to sustain your value system, and that's why you have to be multi-skilled person and open to learn. Again, Geeta mentioned about that learn to learn, and that learning process is that new challenges come, new environment come, new technology come, you adopt it fast. So this is one part, that multi-skilling is going to be paying thing in future, not just to go with one skill, but to have multiple skills, or to develop a skill ability. Other thing I feel very important for designer, to empathetic to environment, empathetic to people, humble, human, and those are the human values going to pay to great extent, that you connect to the people in society. It will pay off to great extent, and it will pay off to industry also. And obviously industry, when you are going, industry may not value that, but if a graduate is optimistic, I think that can add value to the industry to great extent. Because if the person has confidence to really tackle something which is ambiguous, that can bring a lot of value to industry. And industry should attract such kind of students who are human, humble, empathetic, optimistic, and having multi skills. That is the way I think industry should look into.
Okay, so now my turn, sir. So the question is targeted to both of you, and Geeta first. In this current scenario, design startups, good idea or bad idea?
Good idea, I think. Because one, I mean, let's have a long-term view of this. Design is becoming more important. It's becoming central. I mean, it's not a layer on top of technology the way it was earlier. Design is the core, and then technology is the enabler. The demand for design has shot through the roof. There's just so much demand that if you have the stomach to be an entrepreneur, there's never a wrong time for it. And maybe right now, if you see that the demand is low, it'll just give you time to learn the ropes and become used to the entire idea of running a business, and you're ready when there is a lot more demand.
Sir, over to you.
Oh, I fully agree with Geeta. In fact, I really like the comment which she mentioned about design factory. And the design factory is such a strong concept for the young entrepreneurship, because on their own, they may have a struggle to develop and scale up. But if a couple of people are coming in with different expertise and making a design factory, that's a great possibility of young entrepreneurship for the future, who can offer different kind of services in that factory, if I understood right what Geeta mentioned about that. So yes, I would fully agree that there is a great, in fact, there is a brighter future towards the design and entrepreneurship, but in a holistic manner, if you can provide and support and co-create and coexist, that kind of situation will take them fast in what you call business terms.
Great. So, Ritika, do we have time for one more question, or should we just?
I think we're short on time here because we have to start the next session, but we will definitely try and answer all the questions via mail to all the participants. And on this, high note, I think Geeta and Pradyumna, sorry, you all have given us a lot of food for thought, a lot of enthusiasm, and a lot of encouragement, I think, on what we should be working towards as an institute and the students towards the brighter future. At this point, I'd like to quickly pull up something that the students were doing live while you all were speaking to us. So a small snippet to capture what you had said. This was done while Professor Vyas was doing it. And I think, can we pull up the next one as well? Geeta, that was done to summarize what you had shared with us. And on this note, I'd really like to thank the both of you for coming here and speaking with all of us. And hopefully we see you again for the next year and the next session.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.